He grew up believing he was broken. That's the hook that kept echoing inside Noah's chest, louder than the sermons, sharper than the whispers at school. In a small desert town of Arizona, surrounded by sunburnt hills and silence that seemed to punish difference, Noah carried a truth he had no words for. From the moment his stepfather barked orders about hunting, guns, and football, it was clear what kind of man he was expected to become. Rough, loud, straight. But Noah felt something else blooming quietly inside him. Something the church warned was a sickness. Every Sunday, the pastor's voice thundered about sin, and every Sunday Noah prayed harder, begging to be fixed before someone else noticed. It happened sooner than he thought. At school, one afternoon when the smell of dust still clung to his clothes, a boy walked behind him and hissed into his ear, "Faggot." That single word froze him. His hands tightened around his books, his throat went dry, and he realized he had been caught. The secret he tried to bury under prayers and silence had already slipped out, visible to the world. From that day, Noah felt eyes on him in every hallway. He avoided the locker rooms, avoided laughter, avoided even his own reflection, because reflections could betray you. At home, he found no refuge. His mother, a woman balancing faith with fear, chose denial. She clutched her Bible tighter, as if the leather cover could keep her son's identity from spilling into daylight. His stepfather's silence was worse than anger. Cold stares at dinner, an absence that screamed louder than words. Noah learned to eat quietly, to keep his voice steady, to never let his hands move in a way that could be judged as soft. Deep inside, he began to believe what they wanted him to, that being himself was a punishment, a cross he had to carry because God had turned his face away. Nights became his battlefield. Alone in his room, the prayers were no longer soft whispers of hope, but desperate bargains. Please take this away. Please make me normal. Please don't let me burn in hell. He pressed his face into the pillow so his sobs would not be heard, terrified that even tears could be counted as weakness. Each time the pastor preached about sinners who would never see heaven, Noah heard his name hidden inside those words, and still he prayed harder. This was the world Noah was born into, a home where love came with conditions, a school where cruelty had no consequences, a faith that told him he was the mistake in the middle of creation. Yet even in those early years of rejection and silence, a tiny ember of resistance flickered. Somewhere deep, he knew he wanted more than just survival. He wanted to belong. He wanted to be seen. But before he could ever reach that place, he would have to walk through years of denial, masks, and pain. His story had only begun, and it began with the crushing weight of shame. If you've ever carried a secret so heavy, it made you believe you were unworthy of love, stay with Noah. His journey is not just about loss, it is about transformation. Subscribe to Heart Story, because every story here reminds us that even the deepest scars can turn into light. In the quiet despair of Noah's childhood, the lesson is already present when we teach a child that their existence is wrong. We plant wounds that can last for decades. But when that same child learns to hold on to hope, even in silence, that is where healing begins. As Noah moved deeper into adolescence, silence transformed into discipline. If he could not change the feelings, perhaps he could punish them into submission. The church spoke often about sacrifice, about crucifying desires of the flesh. Noah took those sermons literally. He began small, at first skipping meals when he felt attraction stir, kneeling on the hard floor of his room until his knees bruised, whispering psalms until his voice grew raw. He convinced himself that suffering was proof of obedience, and that obedience might one day cleanse him. When he turned toward women, it was never with genuine curiosity, but with obligation. He asked girls to dances because it was expected. He held their hands in public because appearances mattered. He kissed with his eyes closed, praying silently that no one would notice how stiff he became, how absent he felt in those moments. Each relationship lasted only long enough to reassure the outside world, then faded with excuses of busyness or mismatch. Inside, shame collected like dust on an abandoned floor. In private, Noah pursued every path that promised healing. He attended prayer circles where pastors laid hands on his head, declaring demons cast out. He read books on purity, highlighted verses that condemned him, and wrote them on sticky notes above his desk. He even practiced breathing exercises from pamphlets that claimed orientation could shift through discipline. The cycle was always the same. He tried. He failed. He begged for forgiveness, and then he started again. By daylight, he looked like a devout young man fighting temptation. By night, he faced the mirror and whispered questions that had no answers. There were moments, rare and dangerous, when he allowed himself a taste of honesty. Slipping out after dark, he found himself wandering near places whispered about in online forums, parking lots, quiet trails, hidden corners where men like him exchanged fleeting connections. It was never love, never safety, just the brief relief of being recognized, followed quickly by the weight of fear. Every encounter left him both exhilarated and disgusted, a pendulum swinging between euphoria and guilt. The shame afterward was often worse than the loneliness before. College offered him a glimpse of something different, far from his hometown. In crowded lecture halls and late-night dorm rooms, he met people who spoke openly about their identities. It was in this space that Noah stumbled into his first real love. A boy with gentle eyes and a laugh that warmed every room offered him more than just secrecy. He offered belonging. For the first time, Noah felt the possibility of a life without masks. But the fear was stronger than the hope. The verses about hell, the warnings about eternal fire, echoed louder than the heartbeat in his chest. So Noah pulled away. He ended the relationship before it could fully bloom, retreating once again into prayer and silence. The contradiction of his life grew heavier with every passing year. To his family and community, he was the dutiful believer, the young man who would someday make a wife happy. To himself, he was a prisoner, terrified of exposure, convinced that each misstep pulled him closer to damnation. This double life eroded him from within. He smiled during worship, yet cried into his pillow. He spoke of purity while hiding his truth in the shadows. And through all of it, Noah's faith became not a source of comfort, but a constant battlefield. Each verse he read could wound or heal, depending on how it was used. He could not abandon belief entirely. It was stitched into his childhood, into his mother's prayers and his stepfather's discipline. But he also could not reconcile the God of love with the God he had been told despised him. What Noah carried was more than a secret. It was a contradiction that shaped his every choice. And in that contradiction lies a quiet truth. When society teaches someone that love itself is a crime, the harm does not vanish with silence. It grows, it twists, it follows them into every relationship, every prayer, every dream. For Noah, the lesson of those years would remain etched in memory that denying who you are does not make you holy. It only makes you smaller, until the day you decide you deserve more. Work carried Noah far from the deserts that had shaped his silence. When his company offered an assignment in Mexico, he accepted without hesitation. The chance to leave behind the familiar pews, the judgmental glances, the watchful eyes of family felt like an unspoken permission slip. On foreign soil, surrounded by unfamiliar streets and voices, he no longer carried the constant weight of recognition. Here, he was not the boy whispered about in school hallways, nor the dutiful son at the dinner table. He was simply a man trying to navigate a new country. Loneliness, however, did not vanish. It clung to him after long hours of work, filling the small apartment he rented. On one restless evening, he sat in front of his laptop, the glow of the screen painting the walls, and typed words he had never dared to search before "gay bar near me." His hands shook as the search results appeared, and the fear that someone, anyone, might trace those keystrokes tightened his chest. Yet beneath the fear pulsed something stronger, a hunger for belonging he could no longer silence. The very act of pressing enter was a rebellion against years of denial. It was during those hesitant first steps into hidden corners of Mexico City nightlife that Noah met Leon. Leon was vibrant, confident on the surface, but behind the laughter lived a man equally burdened by secrecy. They connected quickly, drawn together by the silent recognition of shared struggle. Leon brought color into Noah's night's music, conversation, the joy of simply holding another man's hand, even if only in the dark. With him, Noah tasted freedom for the first time. He felt what it was like to breathe without apology, to share affection without the weight of scripture pressing down on his shoulders. Yet freedom lived only in shadows. Leon, despite his warmth, could not live openly. His family remained unaware, his colleagues suspicious of any deviation from the norm. Together, they built a fragile sanctuary hidden behind closed doors, a love story that could never withstand daylight. Each embrace carried both tenderness and the knowledge that discovery could end everything. As the weeks turned into months, Noah realized that secrecy, no matter how tender, was still a form of denial. He saw in Leon a reflection of himself, both of them trapped, both of them rationing love in small, cautious portions, both of them apologizing for their truth before it was even spoken. One night, as they sat quietly after the music of the city had faded, Noah understood that real love could not exist without freedom. To deny himself was to deny the very possibility of joy. The time in Mexico did not give him permanence, but it gave him clarity. It was here, in the company of Leon and the echoes of hidden songs, that Noah first allowed himself to imagine a life where his identity was not a curse but a foundation. That vision unsettled him. It pulled him into an internal battle more intense than any he had faced before. The verses about punishment still rang in his mind, but so did the memory of Leon's laughter, the warmth of his hand, the truth that could no longer be silenced. When his assignment ended and the return to America loomed, Noah knew he could no longer keep living in fragments. To continue hiding meant slowly suffocating. To step into honesty meant risking rejection. Between those choices lay his future. He chose to walk toward it, trembling but determined. From those nights of secrecy, an important lesson emerged: temporary shadows cannot substitute for lasting freedom. When love is forced underground, it bends and cracks under the weight of silence. Only in the light can it grow strong enough to endure. For Noah, Mexico became not just a place on a map, but a turning point in his soul, a reminder that denial can preserve survival for a time, but only truth can sustain life. Returning to America meant returning to the weight he had carried since childhood. Yet after Mexico, Noah could no longer silence himself entirely. The clarity he had gained pressed against the walls of his old life until it demanded release. It happened around a dinner table, where the smell of roast chicken mixed with the tense quiet of a family too skilled at ignoring what lived in plain sight. Noah placed his fork down, his voice steady but his heart racing, and spoke the words that had burned in him for years: "I am gay." The silence that followed was thick, almost physical. His stepfather pushed back from the table without a word and left the room, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. His mother stayed seated, tears streaming down her cheeks. She whispered the familiar phrase she had carried like armor: she loved her son, but she hated the sin. For Noah, those words struck harder than silence. They confirmed what he had always feared, that her love would forever be conditional, tethered to a belief that his existence was a mistake. In the weeks that followed, family gatherings grew brittle, conversations were shorter, smiles more forced. Friends he had known from church began to pull away, replacing warmth with awkward distance. Some avoided him entirely. Yet amid the rejection, a strange strength rose in Noah. The years of shame had built a resilience he never knew he possessed. He realized that if acceptance was not offered in private rooms, he would create spaces where it could flourish in public ones. Noah began sharing pieces of his story at small community events. At first, his voice trembled as he stood in front of classrooms and support groups, recounting the prayers, the failed attempts at conversion, the years of guilt. But each time he spoke, the trembling eased, and in its place came a steady conviction. Students listened with wide eyes. Parents asked questions they had been too afraid to voice. Some cried quietly, confessing their own struggles with children they did not know how to understand. Noah's vulnerability gave them language they lacked. From those first steps grew a larger mission. He wrote articles about the harm of conversion practices. He published a book that blended his personal journey with research and guidance for families. Invitations began arriving from schools, conferences, and faith communities willing to reconsider long-held beliefs. Slowly, Noah's pain was transformed into purpose, his story becoming a bridge for others standing at the edge of silence. His mother never stopped clinging to her phrase. Love the sinner, hate the sin remained her refrain. Even when Noah stood in front of hundreds advocating for LGBTQ+ youth, and though her refusal cut deep, it did not halt him. For every tear he shed in private, there were dozens of young people who stood taller because he had dared to speak. For every door closed at home, new doors opened in auditoriums and classrooms where hearts were ready to change. Through it all, Noah learned that coming out was not a single moment, but a continuous act of courage. It meant facing disappointment again and again, but it also meant planting seeds of understanding where none had existed before. His life became proof that authenticity, even when met with rejection, carries a power far greater than silence ever could. The truth etched itself clearly in his journey when one person dares to live openly. It challenges entire communities to examine the weight of their own prejudice. Noah discovered that courage does not erase pain, but it transforms it into a force capable of reshaping the world around it. And in that transformation lies a lesson. Acceptance begins not with others, but with the decision to stop apologizing for who you are. Years passed, and the boy who once whispered desperate prayers into his pillow had become a man known for his voice. Noah's book lined the shelves of libraries and homes, his words helping parents see their children not as sins, but as souls worthy of love. He stood on stages, not as someone begging for acceptance, but as someone offering it to others. Yet in the quiet corners of his heart, one ache remained: his mother's approval. Though she had never abandoned him entirely, she had also never embraced his truth without condition. Her refrain, "Love the sinner, hate the sin," lingered like a wall that could not be broken. Then came the phone call that drew him back to the house where silence had once been his cage. His mother had passed away. Noah walked through the narrow hallway, its wallpaper faded, its air heavy with memories. In her bedroom, sunlight cut through the blinds and fell across a small wooden box resting on the nightstand. Inside, folded with care, was an envelope with his name. His hands trembled as he opened it. The letter was brief, but each word carried the weight of decades. "I read the book you wrote," it began. "I saw myself in every page. I thought I was protecting you by clinging to what I was taught, but I was only protecting my fear. You were never a cross to bear. You were the miracle I could not name. I am sorry for letting you carry so much pain. Forgive me, my son." Noah sank into the chair by her bed, tears slipping down his face. For all the speeches he had given, for all the applause and recognition, nothing compared to these words. It was the affirmation he had longed for since childhood, the validation that no sermon or stage could provide. His mother had not lived long enough to speak them aloud, but she had written them, and in writing them, she had finally seen him. Holding the letter, Noah felt grief and peace collide. He grieved for the years lost to silence, for the hugs withheld, for the prayers that painted him as broken. Yet he felt peace because, at last, even if too late, he had been recognized not as a burden, but as a blessing. It was proof that hearts can change. Even those hardened by doctrine, it was proof that love, though delayed, still holds power. Noah left the house that day carrying not just sorrow, but a message larger than his own story. That recognition, whether it comes from a parent, a partner, or from within ourselves, has the power to heal wounds carved deep by shame. To teach children they are wrong for existing is to build scars that last a lifetime. But when those same children grow into adults who embrace their truth, they not only free themselves, they create space for others to heal. And so Noah's journey became more than survival, more than activism. It became a reminder that no one is born to be a burden. Sometimes even parents must learn how to love again. And the greatest strength is not in hiding, but in living openly. turning private pain into a legacy of hope. Do you believe a single letter can change the weight of an entire life? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your story might be the one that heals someone else. And if Noah's journey touched you, subscribe to Heart Stories, where every story is a light for those still walking through the dark.